A comprehensive exploration of AI capabilities for psychological analysis of Valeria Afanador's drawing. The tragic disappearance of Valeria Afanador, a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome from Cajicá, Colombia, on August 12, 2025, has captured significant attention due to the mysterious circumstances surrounding her case. Among the details reported by El Tiempo and Noticias RCN, one element stands out: a drawing Valeria created days before her disappearance, described as a smiling face in the upper right corner and an ambiguous figure, possibly human or animal, in the lower part of the page. Forensic experts suggested this unsolicited drawing might reflect a mechanical thought incited by a third party, prompting speculation that it could offer clues to her fate. This essay explores whether artificial intelligence, AI, can provide a profound psychological analysis of Valeria's drawing, evaluates the capabilities and limitations of relevant AI approaches, and offers recommendations for pursuing such an analysis, including additional materials, examples, and considerations. Context of Valeria Afanador's drawing. According to El Tiempo, Valeria's drawing was not part of a class assignment, making it a spontaneous expression. The description, a smiling face in the upper right and an unclear figure below, suggests symbolic content that could, in theory, reflect her emotional or psychological state. The forensic hypothesis of external influence raises questions about whether the drawing contains conscious cues about her environment or experiences. However, the lack of publicly available details about the drawing's specifics, for example, colors, size, stroke style, and Valeria's personal context, for example, her emotional baseline, interactions at school, complicates any analysis. Psychological analysis of children's drawings often relies on projective techniques, like the house tree person HTP test, which interpret visual elements as reflections of inner states. Yet, such methods are subjective, and applying AI to this task introduces both opportunities and challenges. AI approaches for analyzing drawings. Several AI methodologies have been developed to analyze drawings for psychological insights, particularly in research settings. Below, we explore the most relevant approaches, their potential application to Valeria's drawing, and their limitations. 1. Convolutional neural networks, CNNs, for drawing analysis. Overview: CNNs are deep learning models designed to process visual data by extracting features like shapes, sizes, and spatial arrangements. Research published in IEEE Access, 2023, describes a shallow CNN model for analyzing children's drawings to detect mental health issues, such as anxiety or depression. The model uses feature extraction to identify patterns, for example, large figures indicating negative emotions, small figures suggesting anxiety, and employs multi-label classification with a sigmoid function to categorize psychological states. Application to Valeria's drawing. A CNN could analyze the visual elements of Valeria's drawing, such as the smiling face's position in the upper right, potentially indicating optimism or detachment, and the ambiguous lower figure, possibly reflecting confusion or an external presence. By training on datasets of children's drawings, the model might correlate these features with emotional states. For example, a study in Frontiers in Psychology, 2022, found that children under stress often draw fragmented or ambiguous figures, which could align with the unclear figure in Valeria's drawing. Example: imagine a CNN trained on 10,000 children's drawings, labeled for emotions like fear, happiness, or distress. Inputting Valeria's drawing, assuming a digital scan, could yield a probabilistic output, such as 60% likelihood of anxiety, 30% likelihood of external influence, based on features like the contrast between the smiling face and the ambiguous figure. Limitations: data dependency. CNNs require large, labeled datasets specific to the context. Drawings by children with Down syndrome or from Colombian cultural contexts may not be well represented, reducing accuracy. Interpretability: CNNs provide statistical outputs but lack narrative depth, making it hard to interpret the forensic claim of mechanical thought incited by a third party. Subjectivity, the meaning of a smiling face or ambiguous figure varies by individual, and CNNs may overgeneralize based on training data. 2. House tree person, HTP, test automation. Overview. The HTP test is a projective psychological tool where individuals draw a house, tree, and person, and therapists interpret these for insights into personality or emotional states. Research in IEEE Transactions on Effective Computing, 2024, describes automated HTP analysis using deep learning to extract holistic features, for example, size, shading, positioning, and correlate them with conditions like depression or trauma. Application to Valeria's drawing. Although Valeria's drawing doesn't follow the HTP format, an HTP-trained model could adapt to analyze symbolic elements. For instance, the smiling face might be interpreted as a facade of happiness, a common projective symbol, while the ambiguous figure could suggest unresolved fears or external influence, as speculated by forensic experts. A model might score the drawing for emotional indicators, such as high emotional conflict based on the juxtaposition of a positive and unclear figure. Example, in a 2023 study, an HTP model analyzed a child's drawing of a small, isolated figure and flagged it as indicative of social withdrawal. Similarly, Valeria's ambiguous figure could be analyzed for signs of uncertainty, but the model would need customization for non-HTP drawings. Limitations, format mismatch. HTP models are designed for specific prompts, not free-form sketches, limiting their direct applicability. Subjectivity. Automated HTP inherits the subjectivity of manual analysis, requiring expert validation. Lack of context. Without data on Valeria's baseline behavior or developmental stage, the model's output may be speculative. 3. Art therapy assessment with AI. Overview. AI in art therapy, as discussed in Science Direct, 2025, uses statistical and deep learning methods to classify psychological states or assign numerical scores, for example, anxiety levels, based on drawing features. These systems combine qualitative therapist knowledge with quantitative analysis, often trained on datasets like structured mandala coloring or person picking an apple from a tree. Application to Valeria's drawing. An art therapy AI could analyze the smiling face and ambiguous figure for emotional indicators. For example, a smiling face might suggest an attempt to project positivity, while the unclear figure could indicate confusion or external influence, aligning with the forensic hypothesis. A model might assign a score, such as 4/10 for distress, based on feature contrasts. Example, a 2024 study used an AI to analyze children's free-form drawings, finding that chaotic or undefined figures often correlated with stress. Valeria's drawing could be inputted into such a system, potentially flagging the ambiguous figure as a stress indicator, though without conclusive evidence of external influence. Limitations. Dataset relevance. Existing datasets may not include drawings by children with Down syndrome or in similar contexts, reducing accuracy. Subjectivity. Art therapy interpretations are inherently subjective, and AI outputs require human oversight. Cultural bias. The model may not account for Colombian cultural symbols or Valeria's unique developmental perspective. 4. Generative AI with psychoanalytic personas. Overview. Generative AI models, like those discussed in Forbes, 2025, can simulate psychoanalytic dialogue or free association to interpret creative outputs. By role-playing as a figure like Sigmund Freud, these models generate narrative interpretations of drawings based on psychoanalytic principles. Application to Valeria's drawing. A generative AI could be prompted with the drawing's description, a smiling face in the upper right, an ambiguous figure below. It might interpret the smiling face as a defense mechanism, for example, denial of fear, and the ambiguous figure as a projection of an unknown threat or authority figure, potentially aligning with the forensic hypothesis. The output would be a narrative, such as, the smiling face suggests a conscious effort to maintain positivity, while the ambiguous figure may symbolize an unresolved external influence, possibly a person or event in Valeria's environment. Example, using a tool like ChatGPT's custom psychoanalyst. AI, the prompt interpret a child's drawing with a smiling face and an ambiguous figure might yield, the smiling face reflects a desire to project normalcy, while the ambiguous figure suggests subconscious anxiety about an unclear threat. This is speculative but could guide further investigation. Limitations. Lack of empirical grounding. Generative AI outputs are creative and not clinically validated, making them unreliable for forensic purposes. Overinterpretation. The model may assign meaning to vague elements without evidence, risking confirmation bias. Cultural disconnect. Psychoanalytic frameworks may not align with Valeria's cultural or developmental context. Limitations of AI in psychological analysis. The above approaches highlight a critical reality: no current AI can provide a profound psychological analysis of Valeria's drawing with clinical or forensic reliability. Key limitations include data scarcity. AI models require large, context-specific datasets, which are unlikely to include drawings by children with Down syndrome in a Colombian school setting. Subjectivity. Psychological interpretation of drawings is inherently subjective, and AI inherits this ambiguity, often producing probabilistic or speculative outputs. Lack of context. Without metadata on Valeria's emotional state, relationships, or school environment, AI cannot accurately interpret the drawing's significance. Ethical concerns. Analyzing a sensitive case like Valeria's raises privacy and ethical issues, especially if the drawing is shared without consent. AI systems must also avoid biases, such as misinterpreting cultural symbols or developmental differences. Forensic speculation. The claim of mechanical thought incited by a third party requires behavioral or environmental evidence, which AI cannot access without additional data. Recommendations for analyzing Valeria's drawing. Given the limitations, pursuing a meaningful analysis of Valeria's drawing requires a hybrid approach combining AI exploration with human expertise. Below are detailed recommendations. Consult forensic psychologists or art therapists. Action: engage a licensed forensic psychologist or art therapist specializing in children's drawings. They can interpret the smiling face and ambiguous figure in the context of Valeria's developmental stage, Down syndrome, and school environment. Example: an art therapist might use projective techniques to assess whether the ambiguous figure reflects external influence, drawing on protocols like the Draw a Person test. Why? Human experts can integrate contextual factors, for example, Valeria's behavior, teacher interactions, that AI cannot access, providing a more nuanced analysis. Explore experimental AI tools. Action: collaborate with research teams developing CNN-based or art therapy AI models, such as those at universities publishing in IEEE or Science. Provide a digital scan of the drawing, if available, for analysis, ensuring ethical handling of sensitive data. Example: contact researchers from the 2023 IEEE Access study on CNNs for children's drawings. They could adapt their model to analyze Valeria's drawing, though results would be experimental. Why? Experimental AI can provide quantitative insights, for example, emotional scoring, to complement human analysis, but it requires academic collaboration. Use generative AI for hypothetical insights. Action: input the drawing's description into a generative AI like ChatGPT or a custom psychoanalytic model, asking for a speculative interpretation. Treat the output as a creative hypothesis, not evidence. Example prompt: interpret a drawing by a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome, a smiling face in the upper right, an ambiguous figure below, possibly human or animal. Why? This can generate ideas for further investigation, for example, exploring external influences, but should not be used for conclusions. Gather contextual data. Action: collect additional information about Valeria's environment, such as teacher interviews, her recent behavior, or other drawings she made. This data can inform both AI and human analyses. Example: if Valeria frequently drew smiling faces, this might indicate a pattern of expression rather than a unique event tied to her disappearance. Why? Context is critical for interpreting ambiguous symbols, especially in a forensic case. Ethical and cultural considerations. Action: ensure any analysis respects privacy laws and cultural nuances. For example, involve Colombian psychologists familiar with local educational contexts and Down syndrome. Example: a Colombian therapist might recognize whether the ambiguous figure resembles a cultural symbol or archetype, avoiding Western-centric misinterpretations. Why? Ethical handling prevents harm, and cultural sensitivity ensures accurate interpretation. Additional materials and examples. To support analysis, consider the following resources and examples: research papers, IEEE Access, 2023, A Shallow Convolutional Neural Network for Children's Drawing Analysis, Details CNN Methods for Emotional Classification. Science Direct, 2025, AI in Art Therapy, Advances and Challenges, discusses quantitative analysis of drawings. Frontiers in Psychology, 2022, Children's Drawings as Indicators of Emotional States, provides interpretive frameworks for ambiguous figures. Tools. OpenCV with CNN, open source libraries for image processing could be adapted to extract features from Valeria's drawing, though this requires technical expertise. ChatGPT Custom GPT, a custom psychoanalyst. AI model could generate speculative interpretations, accessible via OpenAI's platform. Case study example. In a 2024 case, a child's drawing of a fragmented figure was analyzed using an art therapy AI, revealing stress from family conflict. Valeria's ambiguous figure could similarly be tested, but results would need expert validation. Books. Interpreting Children's Drawings by Kathy A. Malchiodi, 1998, a foundational text on art therapy, offering frameworks for symbolic analysis. The Assessment of Child and Adolescent Personality by Howard M. North, 1986, discusses projective techniques like HTP. Conclusion? Analyzing Valeria Afanador's drawing for profound psychological insights is a complex task that no current AI can fully accomplish with forensic or clinical reliability. CNNs, HTP automation, art therapy AI, and generative models offer experimental possibilities but are limited by data scarcity, subjectivity, and lack of context. The drawing's reported elements, a smiling face and an ambiguous figure, suggest potential emotional or external influences, but these require human expertise to interpret meaningfully. By combining experimental AI tools with professional forensic or art therapy analysis, and grounding the process in ethical and cultural considerations, a more comprehensive understanding of the drawing's significance may emerge. For those seeking to pursue this analysis, engaging with researchers, therapists, and contextual data is the most promising path forward.